Marcus Adeyemi slammed his fists against the bathroom sink and stared at his own reflection. His hands were shaking. His jaw was tight. The penthouse was dead silent at 3 a.m., no traffic, no wind, no sound from the city 30 floors below. And yet the crying was everywhere. Inside the walls. Inside his chest. Inside his skull. He turned on the faucet, splashed cold water on his face, and gripped the edges of the sink until his knuckles went pale. "Stop," he whispered. "Stop, stop, stop." The crying did not stop. This was the man Forbes called the most influential tech founder of his generation. This was the man worth $4 billion. This was Marcus Adeyemi, and he was coming apart at the seams in a bathroom that cost more than most people's homes, haunted by a sound nobody else could hear. But to understand how he got here, you have to go back to the beginning. Marcus grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Houston, Texas, with his mother, his grandmother, and a second-hand computer his mother bought from a garage sale when he was 9 years old. She worked double shifts at a hospital. She ironed her scrubs every single morning. She told Marcus the same thing every night before she turned off the light. "Baby, we didn't come this far for you to settle. You hear me? We didn't come this far." He heard her. He carried those words like a second skeleton. He got the scholarship. He got into MIT. He dropped out in his second year because the idea was already too big to wait. He built Omnivision in a studio apartment with 2 friends and a whiteboard covered in diagrams nobody else could understand yet. By the time he was 31, governments on 4 continents were using his facial recognition software to monitor borders, track criminals, and, as the company's pitch deck proudly stated, build safer societies through intelligent surveillance. He believed it. He genuinely, completely believed it. At his product launch in San Francisco, standing on a stage in front of 2,000 people, he said, "We are building the infrastructure of safety. We are making the world a place where the innocent have nothing to fear." The crowd erupted. He felt like a man standing at the summit of everything his mother had ever prayed for. Nobody applauded louder than the government officials in the front row. The surgery was supposed to be routine. A minor procedure to correct a heart irregularity his doctor had been monitoring for 2 years. His assistant scheduled it on a Tuesday so he could be back in the office by Thursday. He kissed his mother on the cheek in the waiting room and told her, "I'll see you in 2 hours. Stop looking at me like that." She grabbed his hand. "I'll be right here." He was on the table for 40 minutes before something went wrong. His heart stopped for 41 seconds. The surgical team moved fast and brought him back, but for those 41 seconds Marcus Adeyemi was somewhere else entirely. He didn't see light. He didn't see faces or gates or anything peaceful. He heard crying. Enormous, ancient, collective crying, the kind of grief that doesn't belong to one person but to hundreds, maybe thousands, all compressed into a single unbearable frequency. It wasn't frightening exactly. It was heavier than fear. It felt like being submerged in someone else's sorrow and realizing it was also yours. Then the paddles hit his chest and he came back gasping. "He's back," a voice said. "He's back, we've got him." His mother was crying when they wheeled him out. "I knew it," she kept saying. "I knew something happened. I felt it. I'm fine," he told her. "It was nothing. I'm fine." But that night, alone in the hospital room, the crying came back. Softer this time. Patient. Like it knew he wasn't going anywhere. He told his therapist. She said it was a stress response triggered by the near-death experience. She gave him breathing exercises and a prescription he never filled. He told his doctor, who blamed residual effects from the anesthesia. Marcus nodded at both of them and said nothing more about it. But the sound followed him home, followed him into the office, followed him into boardrooms and restaurants and the back seats of cars. Always faint, always present, always waiting. He started having trouble concentrating. He started arriving late to meetings, which had never happened in 15 years of running a company. His COO pulled him aside one afternoon and said, "Marcus, talk to me. What's going on with you?" "Nothing," Marcus said. "I'm fine." He wasn't fine. 3 weeks after the surgery he was sitting at his desk at midnight when a news alert lit up his phone. He almost ignored it. He almost scrolled past. But something made him stop. The headline read, 47 activists arrested in Lagos using AI facial recognition technology. He clicked it. He read it. Then he read it again. The article named the software used by Nigerian authorities. It named the company that built it. It named Omnivision. Marcus sat very still for a long time. The crying swelled around him like a tide coming in. He told himself it wasn't his fault. He told himself governments made their own decisions. He told himself Omnivision built a neutral tool and what authorities did with it was outside his control. He repeated these things the way a man repeats a prayer he's no longer sure he believes. He hired a genealogist the following week. He told himself it was just curiosity, just something to do while his head was noisy. The genealogist called him 14 days later and asked if she could come in person. He said yes, not thinking much of it. She laid a folder on his desk and folded her hands on top of it before she opened it, the way people do when they're delivering news they've had to prepare themselves to say. His bloodline traced to the Bight of Benin. Enslaved ancestors who crossed the Atlantic in the holds of ships. Generations of people who survived things that should not have been survivable. And more recently, his grandfather's village in Ogun State, Nigeria, was one of the first rural communities flagged and surveilled in a government crackdown in 2019. Marcus stared at the page. What technology did they use? He asked quietly. The genealogist looked at him carefully. The report says Omnivision. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just sat there while that word settled over him like ash. He pulled the contracts himself that night. Searched the company's government client files until he found it. His signature at the bottom of an agreement with the Nigerian Interior Ministry dated March 2018. He had signed it on a Tuesday. He remembered because he'd had lunch with his mother afterward and she'd ordered the jollof rice and said it wasn't as good as hers. He had built the tool that watched his grandfather's people. He had signed the paper that made it official. And he had gone to lunch. The crying became almost unbearable. He called an emergency board meeting. He was controlled, he was clear, he laid out what he'd found and told them Omnivision was terminating its contracts with authoritarian governments immediately. The room went very quiet. Then his longest-serving board member, a man named Gerald who wore the same Rolex every day, leaned forward and said, "Marcus, those contracts are 60% of our revenue. You're talking about destroying this company." "I'm talking about what's right," Marcus said. "You're talking about $4 billion. I know exactly what I'm talking about. They threatened to remove him. 3 members said they would sue." Gerald told him he was having some kind of breakdown and needed to step back and let steadier hands take the wheel. Marcus looked around the table at all of them, men who had celebrated with him, men who had flown on his plane and toasted to his success, and he felt something shift inside him. Not anger. Something quieter and more final than anger. He went home. He sat in the dark. He picked up his phone and recorded a video. No lighting, no script, no PR team, no second takes. Just his face and his voice and 14 years of reckoning compressed into 7 minutes. He announced the termination of all government contracts tied to authoritarian surveillance. He announced a full transparency report on every deal Omnivision had made. He announced a $200 million fund for communities harmed by AI surveillance technology worldwide. Then he posted it and put his phone face down on the table. The stock dropped 34% by morning. 2 board members resigned before noon. A Senate subcommittee announced an investigation by evening. His phone did not stop. His lawyer called 11 times. Gerald left a voicemail that lasted 4 minutes and contained words Marcus had never heard from him before. Marcus slept through all of it. Deep, still, dreamless sleep. The first real sleep he'd had since the surgery. Months later he stood in a village in Ogun State that looked almost exactly like the photograph in the genealogist's report. An elderly woman pressed food into his hands without asking if he was hungry. The way grandmothers do when feeding someone is the same as saying "I see you." He ate. He said thank you in Yoruba, badly, and she laughed at him, warmly. He thought about his mother. He thought about her ironing her scrubs at 5 in the morning. He thought about everything that had to survive, everything that had to endure, everything that had to refuse to be erased, just so he could be standing in this village on this afternoon holding this food. He had lost billions. He would lose more before it was over. The road ahead was genuinely uncertain. But the crying had stopped. And for the first time in his life, Marcus Adeyemi felt like a man his ancestors would have been glad to know.